In the prestigious neighborhood of Oakwood Heights, Thomas Miller had achieved his dream. A beautiful home for his family, a prestigious position as district attorney, the perfect fresh start. But behind the manicured lawns and pristine facades lurked a system of discrimination that had forced countless families out of their homes. When Thomas and his family face harassment at every turn, denied pool access, targeted by police and subjected to whispered threats, they discover a shocking truth. The neighborhood's power players aren't just racist. They're running a profitable scheme, forcing minority homeowners to sell at rock-bottom prices. Now Thomas must use his legal expertise and courage to expose the corruption, even as the threats escalate from intimidation to breaking and entering. Will one family's stand against injustice transform an entire community, or will Oakwood Heights' powerful elite silence them forever? Has your community ever had its own version of the Prestons? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice served. Saturday morning brought a brilliant sunrise over Oakwood Heights as Thomas Miller pulled their SUV into the driveway of 427 Maple Street. The colonial-style house with its fresh white paint and black shutters represented everything the family had worked towards for decades. "We're home," Thomas announced, squeezing his wife Denise's hand. Denise smiled back, though concern flickered in her eyes. At 52, she had experienced enough in life to temper optimism with caution. "It's beautiful, Thomas, just like the pictures." Their children, Marcus and Aisha, emerged from the backseat, stretching after the long drive from Chicago. At 17, Marcus stood nearly as tall as his father, while 15-year-old Aisha shared her mother's observant nature. "Dad, you sure about this place?" Marcus asked, scanning the pristine neighborhood where American flags hung from porches and luxury cars occupied driveways. Thomas adjusted his glasses. "I'm sure. The district attorney position is an opportunity I can't pass up. Better schools for you both, safer streets, and a fresh start." The moving truck arrived 30 minutes later. As they unloaded boxes, Thomas noticed neighbors watching from windows and porches, but few came to introduce themselves. One elderly man walking his dog crossed to the opposite sidewalk when approaching their house. "Give it time," Thomas told himself. "People are busy." By 3 p.m., the summer heat had transformed their moving efforts into a sweat-soaked ordeal. Boxes filled the living room, and fatigue had settled over the family like a heavy blanket. "You know what we need," Thomas declared, wiping his brow. "The community pool, the realtor said it's just 3 blocks away." Aisha perked up. "Swimming sounds amazing right now." "Let's do it," Denise agreed. "We could all use a break." 20 minutes later, the Millers walked down Oakwood Drive toward the sound of splashing and laughter. The community pool came into view, an impressive facility with an Olympic-sized main pool, a separate kiddie area, and a snack bar. Families lounged on deck chairs while children played in the water. As they approached the entrance gate, Thomas noticed a subtle shift in atmosphere. Conversations quieted. Several heads turned their way. A middle-aged white man sitting at a check-in table straightened in his chair. His polo shirt bore an embroidered logo, Oakwood Heights Community Association. His name tag identified him as Richard Whitman, Pool Committee Chair. "Good afternoon," Thomas greeted him warmly. "We're the Millers, just moved in today on Maple Street." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Do you have your pool passes?" "Not yet. Our realtor mentioned a welcome packet, but with the move today." "I'm sorry, but no one enters without proper identification and pool passes," Richard interrupted. "Association policy." Thomas maintained his composure. "I understand, we have our closing documents and IDs if that helps. Perhaps there's an exception for new residents." "No exceptions," Richard replied firmly, even as a family behind them walked through with just a casual wave. "Security concerns, you understand." Denise touched Thomas's arm gently. "Let's just come back another day, honey." A woman nearby whispered loudly to her friend, "They're letting anyone in these days." Aisha's face fell as she tugged at her mother's hand. "Mom, I don't want to swim anymore." Thomas felt a familiar weight settling in his chest. After 20 years as an attorney fighting for justice, he recognized discrimination's subtle face. This was supposed to be different. This neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and high property values, was supposed to be beyond such pettiness. "We'll come back with our passes," Thomas said evenly. Then with deliberate calm, "And just so you know, I begin as Pinecrest County's new district attorney on Monday. I'll be sure to review the community association's policies regarding equal access." Richard's expression flickered briefly. "Rules are rules, Mr. Miller. Nobody gets special treatment here." As they walked away, Thomas's mind was already cataloging details, witnesses, and exact wording, attorney habits that never quite disappeared. What he couldn't have known was that this minor confrontation was merely the opening move in a much larger game. The battle for acceptance in Oakwood Heights had begun. The following Monday morning arrived with a humid intensity typical of summer. Thomas Miller adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, preparing for his first day as Pinecrest County's district attorney. His charcoal suit and burgundy tie projected the professional image he'd cultivated throughout his career. "You look perfect," Denise said, smoothing his lapel. "Show them what you're made of." Thomas nodded. "I plan to. First impressions matter." As Thomas backed his Mercedes out of the driveway, he noticed Richard Whitman from the pool committee standing with three other men at the corner. Their conversation halted as Thomas drove past, their eyes following his car. The district attorney's office welcomed Thomas with appropriate fanfare. His new assistant, Janet Chen, gave him a tour of the facilities and introduced him to the staff of 20 attorneys and support personnel who would now report to him. "Your predecessor retired after 15 years, Janet explained. "Everyone's curious about your plans for the office." Thomas spent the day reviewing active cases and meeting key personnel. By 5 p.m., he felt cautiously optimistic about the professional transition, even as thoughts of Saturday's pool incident lingered in his mind. Meanwhile at home, Denise decided to introduce herself to their neighbors. She prepared a batch of her famous lemon bars and walked next door to the Prestons' house. Corinne Preston, a blonde woman in her 50s, answered the door with visible surprise. "Hello, I'm Denise Miller." "We just moved in next door on Saturday," Denise said warmly, offering the plate of treats. Corinne accepted the lemon bars with a tight smile. "Thank you, that's thoughtful. We're looking forward to becoming part of the community," Denise continued. "My husband Thomas started as the new district attorney today." Corinne's eyebrows rose slightly. "District attorney? I wasn't aware." Their conversation remained superficial, with Corinne offering little beyond cursory responses about trash collection days and the name of the local grocery store. As Denise turned to leave, Corinne called after her. "Just so you know, we have an active neighborhood watch here. We take security very seriously." Denise nodded. "That's good to hear. We had some break-ins last year, so we're vigilant about unfamiliar faces," Corinne added pointedly. "I understand," Denise replied, her smile unwavering despite the implication. "Have a nice day." Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner, they shared their experiences of the day. "The school seems okay," Marcus reported, "but when I mentioned where we lived, some kids asked if I was the new family in the White House on Maple." Aisha nodded. "Same thing happened to me. It's like everyone already knew about us." Thomas frowned. "Small communities talk, it's natural." "The neighborhood watch is apparently very active," Denise added, describing her interaction with Corinne Preston. As they finished dinner, the doorbell rang. Thomas opened the door to find a police officer standing on their porch. Officer James Wilson introduced himself as the community liaison for Oakwood Heights. "Just making routine visits to new residents," he explained, though his eyes scanned the interior of their home with undisguised curiosity. "We like to make sure everyone understands local ordinances." Thomas recognized the tactic immediately. "Of course, Officer Wilson, as the new district attorney, I'm particularly interested in community policing approaches. Perhaps you'd like to schedule a meeting at my office to discuss your methods in more detail." Officer Wilson's demeanor shifted visibly. "You're the new DA?" "That's right," Thomas confirmed. "Thomas Miller. I look forward to working closely with the department." After reviewing several obscure local ordinances, lawn height requirements, noise restrictions, parking regulations, Officer Wilson departed, promising to keep an eye on the neighborhood. As Thomas closed the door, Denise crossed her arms. "That wasn't a standard welcome visit." "No," Thomas agreed. "That was a message." Later that night, as Thomas checked that all doors and windows were locked, a habit from their Chicago days, he spotted two men in a parked car across the street. They remained there, engine off, watching their house. Thomas drew the curtains and made a mental note to install security cameras the following weekend. 20 years as an attorney had taught him to recognize intimidation tactics when he saw them. The battle lines in Oakwood Heights were becoming clearer by the hour. Thomas Miller's first week as district attorney proceeded with a measured professionalism that earned him respect at the courthouse. By Friday afternoon, he had already reviewed 30 pending cases, met with the police chief, and proposed policy changes to improve efficiency within the department. Judge Dawn Hampton, a veteran of the bench for 25 years, invited Thomas to her chambers following a preliminary hearing. "You've impressed me, Miller," Judge Hampton said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "Your predecessor became complacent in his final years. The courthouse needs fresh energy." Thomas adjusted his glasses. "Thank you, Your Honor. I believe in thorough preparation." "Call me Dawn when we're not in court," she replied. "How are you settling into Oakwood Heights, beautiful community though it can be?" "Traditional," Thomas chose his words carefully. "We're still adjusting. The neighbors haven't been particularly welcoming." Judge Hampton's expression shifted subtly. "Richard Whitman giving you trouble? You know Richard." "Everyone knows Richard," she sighed. "He's been pool committee chair for 15 years and treats it like he's guarding Fort Knox. He's also on the HOA board with Douglas Preston." Thomas recognized the surname. Preston, his wife is our next-door neighbor. Douglas is a defense attorney, handles most of the wealthy clients in the county, Judge Hampton explained. He's also quite influential in community politics. This information provided context for the cool reception his family had received. Thomas was potentially threatening established power structures. Meanwhile at home, Denise received their first mail delivery, including the community welcome packet with their pool passes. She decided to take Aisha swimming that afternoon. When they arrived at the pool, Richard Whitman was absent, but his presence lingered through a group of women who fell silent as Denise and Aisha approached. Denise presented their passes to a teenage attendant who examined them with unusual scrutiny before reluctantly admitting them. Denise and Aisha claimed 2 lounge chairs in an empty section of the pool deck. Within minutes, a woman approached them. "Excuse me, those chairs are reserved," she stated firmly. "There's no sign," Denise replied, noticing other empty chairs without reservations. "It's an understanding among regular members," the woman insisted. "Those chairs belong to the Tuesday Ladies Water Aerobics group." Before Denise could respond, a voice interrupted. "That's not true, Vivian," an older black woman approached, her silver hair elegantly styled. "I've been swimming here for 20 years and there's never been reserved seating except for official events." The first woman retreated with a huff as the newcomer introduced herself. "Dorothy Washington. My husband was a judge here before he passed. You must be the new family on Maple Street." "Denise Miller," she confirmed. "And this is my daughter, Aisha." Dorothy settled into a nearby chair. "Word travels fast in Oakwood Heights. I heard your husband is the new DA. News travels even faster than I expected," Denise said. Dorothy lowered her voice. "The Prestons and Whitmans have run this community like their personal fiefdom for years. A black DA with authority over their legal matters has them nervous. We're just trying to live our lives," Denise sighed. "I understand. My husband faced similar resistance when he was appointed to the bench in 1993. We were the 3rd black family in this neighborhood." Dorothy's eyes reflected decades of similar experiences. "Things improved, but some people never change." As they spoke, Aisha returned from the pool, water dripping from her swimsuit. "Mom, a boy told me I should stick to the public pool in Westside." Dorothy's expression hardened. "Who said that, sweetheart?" "That boy over there," Aisha pointed toward a teenager laughing with friends. "He said his dad is on the community board." "That's Bradley Preston," Dorothy confirmed. "Karen and Douglas's son." Later that evening, Denise relayed the pool encounter to Thomas as they prepared dinner. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus rushing through the front door, his basketball under his arm and anger in his eyes. "What happened?" Thomas asked. "I was playing at the community court and some guys told me I needed a court pass," Marcus explained. "When I questioned them, a patrol car pulled up. The officer said someone reported suspicious activity at the basketball court." Thomas set down his knife. "Did you get the officer's name?" "Wilson, same guy who came by the house Monday." Thomas's jaw tightened. "This isn't coincidence anymore. They're systematically testing our limits." "What are we going to do?" Denise asked. "We can't fight the entire neighborhood." Thomas looked at his family, Denise's worried expression, Marcus's frustration, Aisha's quiet confusion. He'd spent his career fighting for justice in courtrooms. Now the battlefield had shifted to his own community. "We're not fighting the entire neighborhood," he said firmly. "Just the ones who deserve it." Thomas Miller sat in his office Monday morning, reviewing case files while simultaneously drafting a methodical approach to his neighborhood situation. 20 years of legal experience had taught him that evidence and documentation were paramount. "Janet, could you come in, please?" he called to his assistant. Janet Chen entered with a notepad. "What do you need, sir?" "I'd like you to pull all cases from the past 5 years involving residents of Oakwood Heights. Focus on discrimination complaints, unusual police calls, and any lawsuits involving the homeowners association." Janet raised an eyebrow. "That's specific. May I ask why?" "Research," Thomas replied. "I need to understand community patterns." After Janet left, Thomas opened his personal laptop and created a secure document titled Oakwood Heights Incidents. He began logging every encounter his family had experienced. Date: Saturday, June 7. Location: community pool. Incident: denied entry despite homeownership. Witnesses: multiple pool attendees. Perpetrator: Richard Whitman Pool Committee. Evidence: none collected. Date: Monday, June 9. Location: home 427 Maple Street. Incident: unusual police visit citing ordinances. Witnesses: family members. Perpetrator: Officer James Wilson. Evidence: none collected. Date: Friday, June 13. Location: community pool. Incident: seating discrimination attempt. Witnesses: Dorothy Washington. Perpetrator Vivian, last name unknown. Evidence none collected. Thomas stared at the pattern emerging. Isolated incidents could be dismissed, but the systematic nature suggested coordination. Later that afternoon, Janet returned with a file folder. "You'll find this interesting," she said. "In the past 5 years, Oakwood Heights HOA has been named in 7 complaints, all settled confidentially. 6 involved minority families who subsequently moved away." "Who represented the HOA?" Thomas asked. "Douglas Preston from Preston and Associates." The connection crystallized. Thomas's predecessor had never pursued these cases beyond preliminary investigations. Meanwhile, Denise had her own investigative strategy. She'd invited Dorothy Washington for coffee at their home. "The pattern isn't new," Dorothy explained, sipping from a porcelain cup. "The Prestons and Whitmans orchestrate what they call community protection. Any family they deem unsuitable faces gradual pressure until they leave." "How do they get away with it?" Denise asked. "Documentation is difficult. Everything happens through plausible deniability, enforcing rules that only apply to certain residents, police calls for suspicious activity, social isolation." Dorothy sighed. "Without concrete evidence, it's just hearsay." That evening, Thomas gathered his family in the dining room. "We need to implement a strategy," he announced. "Everyone carries their phone at all times and records any unusual interactions. Note names, times, and exact wording." "Should we really be fighting this?" Aisha asked quietly. "Maybe we should just move somewhere else." Thomas knelt beside his daughter's chair. "Running teaches the wrong lessons, sweetheart. Some battles need fighting, not just for ourselves but for others who might come after us." Marcus nodded firmly. "I'm in. I downloaded an app that records audio automatically when activated." Their planning session was interrupted by the doorbell. Through the peephole, Thomas saw Karen Preston holding a plate of cookies. "Thomas Miller," Karen smiled thinly when he opened the door. "I thought it was time we properly introduced ourselves. My husband Douglas and I would like to invite your family to our summer barbecue next Saturday." Thomas maintained a neutral expression. "That's very kind. Douglas is quite interested in meeting the new district attorney," Karen continued. "He handles many cases in your courthouse." "I'm aware of your husband's practice," Thomas replied evenly. Karen's smile tightened. "Well, we hope you'll join us. Many influential community members will attend. It's good to establish proper connections." After she left, Thomas turned to his family. "That wasn't an invitation, it was reconnaissance." "Are we going?" Denise asked. "Absolutely," Thomas confirmed. "But first we prepare." The next morning, Thomas arrived at his office early. Using his official access, he began reviewing Officer Wilson's patrol records. A pattern emerged. Wilson had responded to 17 suspicious person calls in Oakwood Heights over the past year. 15 involved minorities, and all originated from the same 5 addresses. One address appeared most frequently: 431 Maple Street, the Preston residence. Thomas then cross-referenced these incidents with property records. 3 families had sold their homes within months of these calls, all at below-market prices. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't just social discrimination, it was a coordinated system designed to control neighborhood demographics while profiting from forced sales. Thomas closed the files and made a call to Judge Hampton. "Dawn, I need your confidential insight on something," he began. "Who in the FBI field office would you trust with a sensitive investigation?" Thomas Miller spent the next week methodically constructing his strategy. Each family member had become a documentation specialist, collecting evidence of the neighborhood's systematic discrimination tactics. By Thursday morning, Thomas had compiled an extensive digital folder on his secure laptop. It contained voice recordings, timestamps, photographs, and cross-referenced data points that painted a disturbing pattern. As he reviewed the material in his office, Special Agent Marissa Chen from the FBI sat across from him, reviewing copies of his findings. "This is thorough work, Mr. Miller," Agent Chen acknowledged, examining the patrol patterns document. "Officer Wilson's response statistics show a clear demographic targeting pattern." Thomas nodded. "The correlation between these suspicious person calls and subsequent below-market home sales is particularly troubling. Potentially falls under housing discrimination laws," Agent Chen agreed. "But I need to be clear, we can't launch a formal investigation based solely on pattern analysis. We need documented incidents with clear evidence of intent." "That's where Saturday's barbecue comes in," Thomas explained. "The Prestons have invited us, along with other community leadership. Based on previous patterns, they'll likely attempt to intimidate us in subtle ways." Agent Chen frowned. "You're using your family as bait." "Not bait," Thomas clarified. "Witnesses will all be recording, and I've prepared Denise and the kids on what to document." Meanwhile, Marcus had developed his own investigation track at school. During lunch period, he approached Bradley Preston in the cafeteria. "Hey," Marcus said casually, sitting down across from the boy who had harassed his sister at the pool. His phone, positioned in his shirt pocket, was already recording. Bradley looked up with surprise. "What do you want?" "Just thought I'd introduce myself properly. I'm Marcus Miller." Bradley glanced at his friends, then back at Marcus. "I know who you are. Your dad's causing problems." "What kind of problems?" Marcus asked innocently. "My dad says your father is investigating Oakwood residents, says he's misusing his position." Bradley leaned forward. "Your family should understand how things work here before you make enemies." "And how do things work?" Bradley smirked. "Some neighborhoods have traditions, standards. People who respect those standards are welcome. Others usually figure out they don't belong." Marcus maintained his composure. "Has that happened before?" "The Johnsons didn't last 6 months. The Patels left even faster." Bradley shrugged. "Some people just can't handle the community expectations." "And what are those expectations exactly?" Bradley's eyes narrowed. "Why are you asking so many questions?" Marcus stood up. "Just trying to understand the community. See you at your parents' barbecue Saturday." That evening, the Miller family gathered around their dining table, reviewing their collective findings. "Bradley practically admitted the systematic targeting," Marcus said, playing back his recording. "He mentioned specific families by name." Denise added her own discovery. "Dorothy introduced me to Sarah Johnson by phone, the family Bradley mentioned. They moved after 3 months of what she called organized harassment. Their son was repeatedly stopped by Officer Wilson while walking home from school." Thomas updated his evidence document, adding these new connections. The picture is becoming clearer. The Prestons coordinate with Richard Whitman and Officer Wilson to drive away families they deem undesirable. "What about Saturday?" Aisha asked nervously. "What if they do something to us?" "We'll be in a public setting with witnesses," Thomas assured her. "Our goal isn't confrontation, it's documentation. Record everything discreetly, especially any conversations about community standards or traditions." Denise looked concerned. "Should we be worried about retaliation?" "Douglas Preston has significant influence in this county." "That's precisely why this needs addressing," Thomas replied. "His influence has allowed this pattern to continue unchallenged, but as district attorney I have resources my predecessors didn't utilize." He opened his laptop to show them a property record database. "Look at this pattern: 5 homes purchased at below-market rates after harassment incidents, then resold months later at significant profits. 3 were purchased by shell companies that trace back to Preston and Associates." "That's not just discrimination," Denise realized. "It's a profitable scheme." Thomas nodded grimly. "Agent Chen says if we can document clear evidence of coordination between these parties at the barbecue, particularly anything linking the harassment to property acquisition, the FBI can open a formal investigation." As Saturday approached, tension in the Miller household grew. This wasn't just about standing their ground anymore. It was about exposing a corrupt system that had victimized multiple families over years. On Friday night, Thomas checked everyone's recording devices one final time. "Remember, we're not looking for confrontation. We're collecting evidence. Be polite, be observant, and most importantly, stay together." Little did they know that the Prestons were making preparations of their own. Saturday arrived with clear skies and humid air, perfect weather for the Prestons' annual summer barbecue. The Miller family prepared meticulously, double-checking their recording devices and reviewing their documentation strategy. "Remember," Thomas instructed as they walked the short distance to the Prestons' home, "we're gathering information, not confronting anyone directly." The Prestons' property was impressive, a sprawling colonial with manicured gardens and a large backyard featuring a stone patio and built-in grilling station. Approximately 30 guests mingled across the space, many turning to observe the Millers' arrival. Karen Preston approached with a practiced smile. "Welcome, we're so glad you could join us." She guided them toward the backyard. "Douglas is by the grill. He's been looking forward to meeting you, Thomas." Thomas nodded politely while mentally activating his recording app. The family separated according to their plan, Denise joining a group of women near the buffet, Marcus gravitating toward the teenagers playing basketball, and Aisha finding a quiet spot where she could observe interactions. Douglas Preston stood by an elaborate grill station, spatula in one hand and beer in the other. A tall man with silver hair and the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to authority, he smiled broadly as Thomas approached. "The new district attorney," Douglas announced, extending his hand. "Good to finally meet you. I imagine we'll be seeing quite a bit of each other in court." "I look forward to it," Thomas replied evenly. Douglas lowered his voice. "I understand you've been looking into some historical matters regarding our community. Anything I should know about?" "Just familiarizing myself with local patterns," Thomas responded. "Standard procedure." "Of course," Douglas nodded. "Though I should mention, previous DAs found it beneficial to consult with community leadership before initiating sensitive inquiries. Prevents misunderstandings." Before Thomas could respond, Richard Whitman joined them, clasping Thomas's shoulder with forced familiarity. Miller, glad you could make it. Did you get your pool passes sorted out? We did, Thomas confirmed, though I'm curious about the selective enforcement of certain rules. Richard's smile tightened. Rules exist for everyone's benefit. Some residents simply need additional education on community standards. Interesting choice of words, Thomas observed. I've been reviewing some property records recently, noticed some unusual patterns in home sales following what you might call educational periods. Douglas and Richard exchanged glances. The real estate market has natural fluctuations, Douglas offered. Some families simply decide Oakwood Heights isn't for them. At 20% below market value, Thomas questioned. That's quite a coincidence. Across the yard, Denise was engaged in her own intelligence gathering. Karen Preston had introduced her to several women from the neighborhood association. We were just discussing the community beautification project, a woman named Barbara explained. The association has strict standards for property maintenance. We've noticed, Denise replied. Officer Wilson seemed particularly concerned about our grass height, though our lawn meets the 6-inch requirement. Karen sipped her wine. James is thorough. He understands which properties require additional scrutiny. And what determines that scrutiny? Denise asked innocently. Community standards, Karen replied. Some new residents need time to adjust their expectations. Meanwhile, Marcus had integrated himself into a basketball game with Bradley Preston and his friends. During a water break, the conversation turned revealing. My dad says your father won't last 6 months as DA, Bradley commented. Says he doesn't understand how things work here. What does that mean? Marcus asked, phone recording in his pocket. Another boy laughed. It means people who don't fit eventually leave. My dad bought the Johnsons' house for 15% under value after they got tired of the attention. Shut up, Mike, Bradley hissed. What? It's not like they can prove anything, Mike shrugged. My dad says it's just smart business, community preservation with financial benefits. The confrontation Thomas had anticipated came as the evening progressed. Officer Wilson arrived in uniform, ostensibly off-duty but making his presence known. He approached Thomas with deliberate casualness. Mr. Miller, enjoying the neighborhood so far? It's been educational, Thomas replied. I've been reviewing your patrol records, Officer Wilson. Noticed some interesting patterns in your response calls. Wilson's expression hardened. Just responding to community concerns. 17 suspicious person calls from 5 specific households, 15 involving minorities. Thomas maintained eye contact. Statistical anomalies interest me. You should be careful about misusing official access for personal matters, Wilson warned. Nothing personal about investigating potential civil rights violations, Thomas countered. Their exchange was interrupted as Douglas Preston called for everyone's attention, tapping a glass for silence. I'd like to propose a toast to our newest Oakwood Heights residents, Douglas announced, gesturing toward the Millers. Thomas Miller and his family have joined our community during a transitional period. The crowd murmured their acknowledgement as Douglas continued. As our new district attorney, Thomas brings fresh perspective, though I'd caution, his eyes locked with Thomas's, that understanding local traditions and respecting established practices ensures a smoother transition. Thomas recognized the public warning. Taking a step forward, he raised his own glass. Thank you for the welcome, he responded clearly. Believe in traditions too, particularly American traditions of equal protection under the law and fair housing practices. A tense silence fell over the gathering. My family appreciates your hospitality, Thomas continued. We look forward to becoming long-term residents and ensuring this community upholds the highest legal and ethical standards for everyone who wishes to live here. The implication hung in the air. Douglas's smile remained fixed, but his eyes communicated clear hostility. As the Millers departed an hour later, their devices contained exactly the evidence they had hoped to gather. Multiple conversations had confirmed coordination between Preston, Whitman, and Officer Wilson in a systematic effort to drive away unwanted residents. Did you get what you needed? Denise asked quietly as they walked home. Thomas nodded. More than enough for Agent Chen to open a formal investigation, but they know we're onto them now. Should we be worried? Aisha asked. They'll be careful, Thomas assured her. They know I'm documenting everything. What none of them anticipated was just how desperate the Preston coalition would become when threatened. As the Miller family reached their home, they discovered their front door standing ajar. The house had been searched during their absence. The Miller family stood in their violated home, surveying the damage. Drawers had been pulled open, papers scattered, and Thomas's home office thoroughly ransacked. Everyone check your bedrooms for missing items, Thomas instructed calmly, already photographing the scene. Don't touch anything unnecessarily, this is now evidence. Officer Wilson arrived 20 minutes later, responding to their 911 call. His demeanor remained professional, though his eyes revealed discomfort when recognizing whose home had been burglarized. "Anything valuable missing?" Wilson asked, notebook in hand. "Interestingly, no," Thomas replied. "No electronics, jewelry, or cash taken, just papers disturbed and my home office thoroughly searched." Wilson shifted his weight. "Probably teenagers looking for quick cash." "In the middle of the afternoon, during a neighborhood event where my family's whereabouts were known," Thomas countered. "Seems targeted rather than opportunistic." Thomas placed a call to Agent Chen while Wilson completed his report. Within an hour, FBI evidence technicians were processing the scene, collecting fingerprints and documenting the break-in. "This escalates things," Agent Chen explained. "Breaking and entering changes the nature of our investigation." Thomas nodded. "They were looking for our evidence files." "Did they find anything?" Chen asked. "No," Thomas smiled slightly. "Everything important is stored digitally with cloud backups. My physical files were decoys." The break-in proved to be a critical miscalculation by the Preston Coalition. What had begun as an investigation into discriminatory housing practices now included criminal activity targeting a district attorney. The following Monday, Thomas initiated the formal procedures he'd been preparing for weeks. With Agent Chen's team, he presented their evidence to a federal prosecutor who agreed the case merited action. By Wednesday, simultaneous raids were conducted at the Preston and Associates law office, Richard Whitman's home, and Officer Wilson's residence. Douglas Preston was photographed being escorted from his office by FBI agents, evidence boxes stacked in the lobby. The Oakwood Heights community watched in shock as their neighborhood's power structure crumbled. Search warrants revealed extensive documentation of what Preston had called community preservation, a coordinated system targeting minority homeowners with harassment, selective enforcement, and intimidation until they sold their homes at reduced prices. Most damning were the recovered financial records showing how Preston's shell companies had purchased these devalued properties, renovated them minimally, and resold them at substantial profits. Email communications between Preston, Whitman, and Wilson detailed their targeting strategy for specific families, including the Millers. As news broke across Pinecrest County, other victims came forward. The Johnson family, who had left 6 months earlier, provided additional testimony about their experience. Former residents described similar patterns of harassment dating back nearly a decade. 4 weeks after the barbecue, Thomas stood before a bank of microphones at the courthouse steps, addressing the gathered press. Today, federal prosecutors have filed charges against Douglas Preston, Richard Whitman, and Officer James Wilson for conspiracy to violate civil rights, housing discrimination, and abuse of official position, Thomas announced. Additional charges of breaking and entering, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice are pending. This office will cooperate fully with federal authorities while recusing itself from direct prosecution due to conflict of interest. A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Miller, did you anticipate becoming a target when you moved to Oakwood Heights?" "We chose our home for its community, schools, and quality of life," Thomas replied. "Every family deserves that opportunity without discrimination. This case isn't about my family, it's about equal protection under the law." The aftermath transformed Oakwood Heights. Karen Preston sold their home and moved away while Douglas awaited trial. Richard Whitman resigned from the community board. Officer Wilson was suspended pending an internal affairs investigation that expanded to examine the entire department's practices. Most significantly, the Homeowners Association underwent a complete restructuring. Dorothy Washington was elected as the new president, committed to creating inclusive policies. The community pool removed its ambiguous pass system, replacing it with a simple resident directory. 6 months after moving to Maple Street, the Miller family hosted a neighborhood cookout in their backyard. Families of various backgrounds attended, including several who had recently purchased homes in the community. As Thomas grilled burgers, Denise approached with Dorothy Washington. "We've already received applications from 3 families who left because of Preston's tactics," Dorothy reported. "They're considering moving back now that things have changed." "That's the best news I've heard," Thomas replied. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Marcus and Aisha sat with their parents on the back porch. "Dad," Marcus began, "when we first moved here, you said some battles need fighting not just for ourselves but for others. I didn't fully understand then." Thomas nodded. "Justice isn't always about courtrooms. Sometimes it's about standing your ground when others expect you to retreat." "The new kids at school said their parents moved here because they heard it was becoming a truly welcoming community," Aisha added. "That's because of us, isn't it?" "Because of all of us," Denise corrected, taking Thomas's hand. "Community isn't about excluding people, it's about creating a place where everyone belongs." As twilight settled over Oakwood Heights, the Miller family watched neighbors chatting across lawns and children playing freely throughout the neighborhood. The community wasn't perfect, but something fundamental had shifted. Thomas reflected on the journey from that first rebuffed visit to the pool. The same determination that had driven his legal career had proven necessary in their everyday lives. Some battles occurred in courtrooms with judges and juries, others happened in neighborhoods with barbecues and swimming pools. Both kinds of justice mattered equally.